project, and has also been visiting professor at the University of Turin, so we're very happy to listen to your talk. I hope the battery is enough. Yeah, 37 should be okay because it doesn't go down. Did you need the internet? No? Okay. Just. Okay, it's all yours.
Okay. No, it's okay.
So the presentation of the talk's title is Interface Logics in Face Recognition Software.
Yes, thank you very much, Massimo and PIAST, of course, and all people in the internet. Hello. I hope this talk will end before the machine will make the sound again. But I have the difficult task of, of course, having your attention.
Two viewers.
Two viewers, okay, yeah. Please send a chat if you have questions. So, yes, I think the difficult task is that to find something new besides everything that has been said this seminar, which has been very rich. So, once again, thank you very much. My first time in Warsaw, and there's always a lot of links that I will try to put forward. So my presentation is about interface logics, which I have been really interested in graphical user interfaces and how can we use graphical user interfaces to explore cultural data. So of course, this idea comes from other authors. For instance, Noah Wardley-Pruitt, who is from games studies indeed, well, besides digital literature, he and Ian Bogost have worked on operational logics, which refer to patterns in the interplay of data, process, surface interaction, author, and audience. So you can find some of these logics depending on the field of computing technologies or computing media that you are working on. For instance, related to game design, it's not my specialty, but some logics could be applied, for instance, to collision detection or simulated physics, etc. If you do electronic literature, maybe you will find something about textual logics. In my case, I am talking about something more related to graphical user interface logics. That means that what happens, well, in my book, which I entitled The Image Interface, my basic question or the basic idea is to say that because we have a lot of visual technologies and display devices, they have become more and more interactive. So at some point they combine properties from the visual realm with the interaction as well. So this is just 9 logics that I have just found over the invention of media software or software to do cultural, let's say, objects, artifacts. I will not go into much detail about them, so only just that I want to show them because what happens is that we can think about new interfaces. Maybe we can think about new ways of showing information. By combining them, we make this link with linguistics. What happens with inter or intra-linguistics? How do we exchange expressions from other systems? Well, now we have to deal with one more system, which is related to interaction and how do we convey interaction. But because now we have a lot of images, some images acquire this kind of connotation or symbolization. So what and why? So what's the pertinence of this with facets? Well, I'm thinking about one of the objectives that was written in the proposal. That's that we should somehow, in the end, offer or making accessible some kind of data that we will at some point try to build together, like a database. And I think that's really important, like this objective about like sharing this kind of knowledge with people and trying to, not to confront them, but like making them explicit how do we use data. And this is like something that goes in a complementary way to how, in fact, facial recognition software exists today. Because sometimes, as we were saying this morning, and in other presentations, some of them exist as black boxes, right? Some software is just like given and taken for granted. Sometimes we even, well, not we, but the kind of public that sometimes we have to interact with, or we have to teach, we welcome in our courses. It's not that algorithms like grow into the wild and they reproduce, and there is a complex political, economical, technological system behind all those algorithms. And the other thing is that algorithms, they hardly exist one by one. I mean, there's like a galaxy of algorithms working all together. I just want to show one example. All of these services are mainly the most advanced. They do image recognition, object recognition, and because we are in facets, they do face detection, emotion recognition. There's like a vocabulary of emotions, and face verification, of course. So we can use today, for instance, these technologies in form of APIs, application program interface, and then we can integrate those into a new web page, into our server, into an app, knowing that at the same time we are training at the same time the model that they are giving us. Anyhow, we should be paid to use this kind of software. Anyhow, we see that some of the interface logics that prevail in here could be related to some kind of, for instance, domain crossing. We see a configuration of portraits, or like selfies, but like everyday portraits, with data science terminology, with some frameworks that come from Twitter, from other services, with other kind of code that is a JSON data format. We have, well, this kind of things that we have to new elements to represent new actions or new things that we want to happen with this information. So before going into putting into an interface an image, maybe we have to start doing some experiments with a corpus of analysis, and then try to do, okay, so this is an image, what would be interesting to put into an interface? How can we describe in first a collection of images? So I've been working, and I was discussing yesterday with Gabriele, that I've been working on different image corpuses. One of these is album covers. This was done especially for another congress last year, but then I adapted the same database for us today. I only took the whole albums released in 1988 and 2013. Of course, the question is why? Why those years? Because the Congress was in 2018, so I wanted to, no, 2019, so I wanted to have all the albums according to Wikipedia the previous year, okay? And 88, because it was the year before Photoshop was released, so most of these albums were not done with Photoshop. There were some other, of course, software, but at that time it was not like that available as today. Not everybody had a computer. So we have Super Paint and other software. So, and the other thing is that I think that sampling or picking a corpus like this we will like have a couple of universes, and we will find a lot of links that if we, in an epidemiology point of view, if we like make bigger this scale, we're gonna perhaps see again those patterns of connection. So, what are those connections? By the way, in 88, yesterday when we were walking with Gabriel, I said that it reminds me a lot. This is my first time in Warsaw, so it reminds me a lot, and I always think that way. I am in a film by Kieslowski. Decalogue 1 was released in 1988, by the way. So you can see, we can find links, such as faces everywhere. In this case, in 88, there were only, according to Wikipedia, 227 albums against 315. I think there are more, of course, and this is, of course, English-oriented, biased, things like that. Okay, so I went only to Wikipedia and took those. I made a quick classification on an album cover showing only one single face, illustration, multiple faces, no face at all, and how do you hide, what are the strategies to hide your face? Because this is also one of the questions that were in the proposal. So, of course, maybe because of the volume, there are more, of course, images with single faces recently, because there were a little bit more albums. But is there something that we would conclude from this? Would that mean that there are more single member bands? Or that maybe there is only one person that represents the whole band? Or would that mean that close-up shots remain a minority, and maybe it is the portrait that prevails as like the main or the canonical way of placing a album cover? Of course, we see more visual effects, that's for sure. We see a lot of gradients and other tonalities that it was difficult to find before. And maybe there are more ways of occluding faces. So there are more album covers which show more two faces. Would that mean that there are more duos recently, or that there have been like, I'm not sure. We have to, of course, go to see. Many of these discs I haven't listened to, especially in 2018. But well, this is like the distribution. These are just like analytical maps. We have then again to either us as a little bit specialists about maybe only one album, or maybe like when opening this to a public or a wider audience, maybe we can like build or start building something or different perspectives about this. Illustration, that we can say that maybe it remains the main or the favorite style for hard rock genres. A lot of especially skull designs are illustrated, and different and more kind of face representation in form of illustration. So what I'm saying is that in this small sample of images, without even doing or having to pay a machine learning service, we can start like doing or like brushing the collection. We also have comebacks now from people that, of course, still lives, but that keep on doing new things, perhaps. Okay, more like this, small connections, and how to occlude. These are some of the main categories that I found that could be like using masks that really might be of different styles. We can hide through visual effects, okay, using some kind of visual technique, or by posing differently, or is it the frame of the image that helps to hide? Well, this is a possibility, and also of course the question is not only how to occlude, but why to occlude. Okay, So I did only a brief two-dimension polar values to say that either we hide because anonymity or exhibition or mystery, intimacy, okay? Maybe this is only without paying attention to the content of the album, only just by reading or seeing the picture and trying to classify this small corpus. So this is just one example of maybe trying to think about how to describe this. I mean, I'm not saying that we have to measure everything or to find algorithms to like trying to say, okay, when people will come to see our images, let's make them grade the image, and this pushing this button will like count. They feel, I don't know. I'm just saying that there are many different descriptions, categories that we can include and we can try to implement afterwards. And the last thing is that, to conclude, is that images, they like as projections or as ways of putting together information. At some point, to me, it seems that they might be related to forms of life, in the sense that I am citing, of course, I am using the Jacques Fontany scheme and levels of the expression plane. So I'm gonna just focus today on the form de vie, because it was also been said a couple of times today. So is there a form de vie? Is there a life form of digital images, of pixels or voxels, or how can we maybe think about that? Of course, we know that there is a complex, and if we apply this kind of scheme to the digital manifestation, there is a lot of levels that I think I've been talking about this before, but now I will try to focus on the practices. So we can say that we go to how to being together. We can all be together. Rocks are together, raindrops are together, but the special thing is how to live together, right? How to like try to add or think about this content. It's not new, of course. If we think about Bruno Latour's ERC project M, mode d'existence of different, I think indeed he tried to put like different kind of point of views, disciplines, and how to they connect, how can they live and try to solve deep problems that we live every day, and we cannot like say like close the eyes against this problem. So he wanted to just see how, like, for instance, religion and representation could cross, or even double click. Well, anyhow, maybe you know this Bruno Latourian theory. In my case, I wanted just to apply this to a small example, which is a cellular automaton, which was made by indeed Stanislaw Ullmann, a Polish mathematician. Indeed, this one is based on emojis. So let me show you a quick example. This is the large version. I replicated the example, but using emojis. Okay, maybe I wanted to use the faces from the albums, but it took a lot, and it really looked ugly. In this case, there are 3 rules for a cellular automaton. If the cell has only one neighbor, it dies in the next generation. It has 2 together, it will continue to live, as in reproduction. If it has 3 neighbors, continues to live. It has 4, it dies because like overpopulation. So It's like underpopulation, reproduction, and it's like a metaphor. And if you see like every iteration, they like try to get together. It's like a random. There's random in here using the early noise algorithm. So this is like a real. This could take some time to. I did an excess version, but just to show you how somebody will win in the end, right? Like, for instance, Google or oops, I closed it. But anyhow, it's a game, you know. So it's only a silly game, but not that simple. It's a game. So this was life forms, and this is my last slide to conclude. I think that the real thing is that being together, of course, makes me think about artificial life, where like the way we would put images or pixels instead of like throwing them away, like maybe think about more organic ways of putting our information together, which will be like in opposition or going deeper into this living together, like trying to say what's inside, how does it work, how did we come to this result, and going, of course, against the artificial intelligence, but Betis intelligence, stupidity, which would be indeed to replace the passions, the figurations, by technologies and artifacts only to make them consumable, of course. So I think that was the last one. Thank you very much.